On today's Locked On Texans podcast, we continue our preview of training camp and weekend workouts.
You are Locked On Texans, your daily Houston Texans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to a Monday episode of the Locked On Texans podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Just post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedon. That's linkedin.com/lockedon NFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Shout out to everybody who listens and watches the show Monday through Friday. We are back with our regular schedule programming routine. If you are new to the Locked On Texan podcast, be sure to subscribe, like, and comment on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. I am John, some sports guy Hickman. Of course, I'm joined by none other than Sports Illustrated's own and Houston Texan credentialed media member, Cody Davis. No extension for Tytus Howard as of yet. That is something that we'll discuss when we close out today's show. We'll continue with the offensive line preview in the second segment, but it's very important that we open up today's podcast looking at some of the weekend workouts. Guys, over the weekend, the Houston Texans and former Denver Bronco cornerback Ronald Darby, they had a workout with one another. He is a veteran free agent right now. Ronald Darby, he is recovering from a torn ACL from last season, and honestly, he would be, I don't want to necessarily say a substantial add to the Houston Texans DB room, which is something we'll talk about right now, but when we look at Ronald Darby, he started 11 games in 2021, missing the final 5 due to injuries, and then he opened up after the first 5 weeks of last season, suffered a torn ACL, which ended his 2022 campaign. The Denver Broncos released him in March. Cody, when we look at Ronald Darby, also Shaq Griffin, now with the situation that's been going on and brewing with Steven Nelson, the question is this a move Houston is preparing itself for when they eventually move on from Steven Nelson? Before I pass it over to you, Cody, and guys, this is what I just want to say. I value Steven Nelson more based off what we saw from him as a player last year over Ronald Darby based off what we've seen from Ronald Darby throughout his career, especially the last couple of seasons. Guys, Ronald Darby is a player that has had some good moments in the NFL, no doubt about it. But when you look at his career, 16 yards allowed per catch, 17 yards allowed per catch, 15 yards allowed per catch, 14 yards allowed per catch. You have seasons where 700 yards were allowed, 660 yards were allowed, another 730 yards were allowed, another 660 yards allowed in a season. Ronald Darby is a guy that will allow big plays, and this is a defense where if I look at how it is mapped out right now, that's something that they want to cut down on. And I also think this is something that they are built to do as of right now, based off the talent and the production we're going off of from last season. If signing Ronald Darby is an indication that Houston is about to move on from Steven Nelson, I think that is hustling backwards and going in the wrong direction. Just figure out how to get that deal done with Steven Nelson or ride it out on his contract. He doesn't make a lot. I don't foresee him sitting out a year because he doesn't want to play for Houston. This is a business operated and treated as such. We have you under contract. You need to play. If you do not play, fine, go ahead and sit out, but you will not get played, and you won't have the opportunity or the ability to showcase what you can do for either the Houston Texans for the following year or one of the other 31 teams. If adding Ronald Darby is a piece that you just want to add to make him your 5th cornerback, I'm totally fine with that. Of course, I would have to see what the numbers look like if that deal does get done. but I don't want to sign Ronald Darby at the expense of losing out on Steven Nelson.
Here's the thing about this whole Ronald Darby, Steven Nelson. I do believe if workouts did go well, I think he had his workout on Friday. So at the time of this recording, we're recording this on Sunday. So I'm pretty sure within the next 24 to 48 hours, if his workouts did go well, we will get news on whether or not they will give him a training camp invitation or possibly sign him to a 1-year deal, like I just mentioned, depending on how the workouts went. John, if the workouts went good and we get that news within the next 24 to 48 hours, I definitely believe that the Houston Texans are positioning themselves to be in a position where they can afford to cut Steven Nelson. I value him just as well. When we previewed the cornerback position last week, I came on this show and I said that based off of film, based off the numbers, based off of everything in 2022, he was by far the Houston Texans' best cornerback. However, when you take a look at the projection, especially the second year development of what Derek Stingley Jr. can be, it makes Steven Nelson a little bit more expendable, especially when you consider the fact that this is an organization that added Shaq Griffin, who vows that he's going to get back to his Pro Bowl self. And you also got to take a look at the depth with Taviera Thomas, Desmond King, like, they literally are in a position where, look, Steven Nelson had a phenomenal year last year, but because he wants this contract extension, and it's not the fact that he wants the contract extension, they're just not giving it to him right now. It's what he's been doing over the last couple of weeks. As a matter of fact, I think it was on Friday, maybe Friday morning, he tweeted something about finding peace. Like, this guy has really made himself the odd man out. And for those of you who did not catch the show, I know some of you guys might be new listeners, especially with training camp starting on Wednesday. Going back to mandatory minicamp, every time the first team was up, it was Shaq Griffin starting alongside Derek Stingley Jr. and Steven Nelson was on the side. I don't really know too much about Ronald Darby, but I do know this, John. When we did our cornerback position preview last week, one of the things that you and I agreed on was the depth that they have at this position. I think Ronald Darby would give the Houston Texans the opportunity to keep that depth. When you look at who's going to start if they move on from Steven Nelson, and look, there's definitely going to be a training camp battle between him and Shaq Griffin. If Shaq Griffin wins that training camp battle, I can definitely see the Texans moving on from him.
Yeah, if Houston go ahead and cut Steven Nelson now, $1.7 million will go towards the dead cap, but they would save $3.8 million in cap savings. And this is a situation where for Houston, I wonder if it just comes down to D'Amico Ryans and Nick Caserio just saying, hey, we got to cut our losses on this one. He is not working out. He's not the guy that we want in our locker room right now for what we have planned ahead. However, Nick Caserio has always found a way to kind of cater to the players in their situation, right? Trying to help out the players and get them, in a lot of cases, get them to where they may feel most, maybe not most useful, or that he's always been cordial in a lot of these contract talks and situations. This is one of them. What I would just say, we have you under contract. I need you to play again on that field, whether you're the third man, fourth man, or whatever. This is a team that I believe truly wants to compete, and Steven Nelson can help him out in that aspect, in that area. So, again, I'm against signing Ronald Darby if that is the case, because you want to get ready for cutting Steven Nelson. The Houston Texans also worked out wide receiver Jalen Hurd, previously drafted by the San Francisco 49ers, never had an opportunity to get out on the field, suffered injuries year in and year out since he entered the league. And they also worked out Eric Tomlinson, tight end, who previously played for the Denver Broncos in the 2022 season. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job on LinkedIn. Once you post your job, Add the purple hiring hashtag frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you like to interview and hire. This is why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs number one in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster for free. Just post your job at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
Welcome back in, ladies and gentlemen, to this Monday installment of Locked On Texans. John and I are going to continue our training camp preview as we break down every single position group. 3 days left before training camp. 3 more positions left. And with that being said, we're going to talk about the big guys up front on the offensive side of the ball, the offensive line. John, this is a position where if the starting 5 from left to right went Laremy Tunsil, Michael Dater, Scott Quisenberry, Shaq Mason, and Tytus Howard, I will say without a shadow of a doubt that the Houston Texans would have one of the best offensive lines.
No Keon Green.
In the league. We definitely got to save Keon Green. Man, look, I really do hope for that young man on Wednesday that he is out there getting some types of reps, because I don't want to give up on Keon Green. I see the potential, especially his ability to impact the run game, but the fact that he has yet to remain healthy, missed OTAs, missed minicamp. I mean, this young man has to get reps in order to get better, but we're going to save that talk. But John, like I just mentioned, if that was the starting 5, I would 100% say the Houston Texans have one of the best offensive lines in the league. However, they need to improve their depth, because outside of Juice Scruggs, the rookie that they just drafted, the depth of that offensive line during mandatory minicamp did not look good.
I'm not necessarily worried about the depth, simply because whether you rotate, Michael Dater or Kenyon Green at their left guard position, I think Houston to be okay. Scott Quisenberry.
Sorry to cut you off, but throw Juice Scruggs in there, because when we watched him in mandatory minicamp, that's the position they had him playing.
Right, and I wanted to bring it up as well. You can switch out Scott Quisenberry at the starting center position, and if Juice Scruggs goes out there and he's just winning outrightly just winning the left guard position battle, then I'm fine with that. But even with the uncertainty, the left guard and center position, what I really do like is the Titus Howard and Shaq Mason combination. And then, of course, Laremy Tunsil. DJ Bieniemy from ESPN actually went on ESPN, and did he not break down how good of a tackle duo Laremy Tunsil and Titus Howard is? I think it was combined between the both of them 4 sacks allowed last year. I may be off or on, maybe off by 1, but they do a very good job setting the edge for whoever's playing quarterback. Adding Shaq Mason to that for the right side, you finally give Titus Howard 2 things. For one, he's going to be your right tackle for sure now. Like, he's been one of those players who's been through the ups and downs since he's arrived to Houston. But he finally has a very good running mate to play alongside him with, which is something he hasn't had since he came to Houston, at least since he's been a right tackle. Right, for Laremy Tunsil, I think he's going to for sure hold it down on their left side, no doubt about it. You absolutely don't want him to go down due to injury, knock on wood. So it is important for guys like Charlie Heck, who for Houston, I think they're going to really look and see if he's worth keeping around. Guys, don't forget they did sign Greg Little in the offseason, and Austin Deculus, who was drafted last year out of LSU, was a part of that great LSU offensive line. I think they won offensive line of the year in college. He's going into his second year. So when we look at small battles, Charlie Heck and Austin Deculus and Greg Little, those 3 guys are 3 players, 3 tackles, right? I don't think Houston is going to keep all 3, nor should they. Greg Little is one of the guys that has in the 3 competition. He has the experience as a starter lineman in the NFL. I think it comes down to Austin Deculus in Charlie Heck. Charlie Heck, we've seen this movie before. Austin Decklis, excuse me. We really haven't seen your movie before. If anything, it was maybe like a Vine, right? Or maybe a quick TikTok. So the battle between those two young men is going to be great. I'm looking forward to it. But I do want to say overall, what I want to see from this offensive line unit once training camp starts is they are going to make sure that the validation go. I think this can be a top 10 offensive line unit in the NFL.
3 quick things. One, I do not see Charlie Heck making this 53-man roster this year. Like I mentioned, John, the one thing that concerns me when I go back and revisit my notes and go back and revisit what I saw doing OTAs and mandatory minicamp, Charlie Heck might have been I don't want to say the worst player out there, but he did not look great. And you talking about a guy who has been a part of this organization since 2020, if I'm not mistaken. And I know that means he has been a part of this organization ever since the coaching has been suspect at times. You know, he has gone through the terrible gauntlet of this Houston Texans rebuild. However, with him entering the 4th year of his career, I will 100% expect to see Charlie Heck to be better. I think as of right now, Heck has had one decent season, and that might have been in 2021. That was during the time when they was moving Tytus Howard around. And I remember they had that lineup where Charlie Heck was starting at right tackle, and they had Titus Howard starting, I think, left guard. And that was also during the time when Laremy Tunsil was out as well. Like, they had a lot of issues going on. I think that was his only decent season where you can say, okay, maybe he can be a backup to Howard or Tunsil or whoever, but I just don't see it in 2023. Secondly, I'm more intrigued by the development in training camp that we're going to see from Scott Quisenberry. He has been both good and bad over the course of the 2022 campaign, and I just think for him, if he comes into this season with a lot more stability, and he will, given the coaching staff, and if Coach DeMeco Ryans, Bobby Slowick, and everybody else say, you know what, Scott, you are going to be our starting center unless somebody beat you out, I can see him putting on a better performance because look at the numbers, look at the film. There was some good, there was some bad, but there was also some potential. And the last thing I want to point out, the combination between Shaq Mason and Tytus Howard looks extremely good. Going back to mandatory minicamp once again, they spent majority of their time going up against Jerry Hughes, Malik Collins, and Will Anderson Jr. And neither one of those guys, that combination did not give up a pass rush, nor did it give up a sack. And they had all 3 of those guys on several occasions on the back of their heels. John, you already mentioned it. You think that this offensive line has the potential to be top 10 in the league, and I'm going to agree with that.
I'm back here, Locked On Texan listeners and viewers. Before we close out today's show, no extension for Titus Howard. A couple of things, man. When you look at career so far for Titus Howard, from year 1 to year 5, he's been up and down. I think he's played every position on the offensive line except for center. We talk about Keon Green and the gauntlet he went through as a rookie. The gauntlet for Titus Howard has always been uncertainty and a shaky foundation. Last year, I think it all came together for him. His best season by far in his career. He allowed 3 sacks on the year. I think Houston may have shot themselves in the foot by not getting a deal done before this year. The money is going to be a whole lot more by the time that deal needs to get done. If it's not done in the offseason, which Nick Caserio has done before, you look at the next offseason, you better hope somebody doesn't reset the market before Titus Howard. And that money right now, I don't take it 17, 18, 5 per year for the Houston Texans. This is also a year for him to, I think, get respect nationally. Houston will be under a lot more national spotlight. You got 2 players drafted in the top 3. You got DeMeco Ryans. He have a lot of reason for people to tune in for the Houston Texans. And I think they're going to see how good he's been. They're going to see what we saw from him last year. Before last year, I would not go out and say that Houston Texans need to make sure they lock this guy in. But after last season, we saw it, we talked about it. I think his future lies in the eyes of DeMeco Ryans, and I've said this before. It depends on what the new head coach wants to do for the future of this franchise. And if the money that Titus Howard is going to command is too much and they feel like that money can go in other places and that can be replaced by another right tackle in the draft or maybe free agency, I don't know, for a cheaper price, then that deal won't get done. I'm curious to see if Titus Howard is going to go out there and change the minds if he hadn't already, and make people realize that he deserves that money, because this is a guy, pairing him with Laremy Tunsil for the next 3 to 4 seasons is very important to the success of your rookie quarterback, CJ Stroud, or Davis Mills, or whoever in the next 5 years will be taking snaps. Hopefully CJ Stroud taking snaps for the Houston Texans.
Yeah, I agree with everything that you said, John, and I'm not going to lie to you. I am a little bit concerned that they still haven't locked Tytus Howard down, and I know there's the thought of going out there. Let's say if, the market is too high for him, going out there, replacing him in the draft or replacing him with another veteran right tackle. But why do all that when you have a very solid, a very dependable, a very reliable, and a very promising right tackle already on your offensive line? And we talked about the pairing between him and Shaq Mason. We've been talking about for going on 2-3 seasons now, the pairing between him and Laremy Tunsil. And it was kind of unfortunate to have your tackles locked down then because you did not have a franchise quarterback. Now with you bringing in CJ Stroud, especially knowing that the next 4 to 5 years is possibly going to be the most important years in this franchise's history, given the fact that a lot of your young guys are on rookie deals. And you know how in the NFL you always want to cash in when you have so many young promising players on rookie contracts, especially your quarterbacks. Just go ahead, lock up Titus Howard as of right now for 3 to 4 years and just go all out. Like, I just don't want and this is my biggest fear, and you said it best. The fact that there are going to be a lot more eyes on the Houston Texans in 2023. All that's going to do is raise up the price for Titus Howard even more. Hopefully, they could get a deal done during training camp or during preseason or whatever the case might be. I just do not want to see the Texans go into the season without extending Titus Howard. You already gave Shaq Mason an extension before he even took a snap for the team. I understand it. I get it. You was able to sing Kumbaya with Laremy Tunsil. You was able to lock him up. Just do the same for Titus Howard and call it a deal.
Yeah, right now, this year, Titus Howard is making a little over $3 million per year. Cody, you mentioned the Mike McGlinchey contract a couple months back about the projected contract at $17.5. I believe I looked at the Brian O'Neill from the Vikings. He makes $18.5. The highest is Lane Johnson, one of the best to do it in the NFL. Right under him is Jawan Taylor, who, by the way, Jawan Taylor is 26. Titus Howard is 27. What I'm getting at is, if a deal doesn't get done mid-season, by the time season goes around, I think that is the story on Titus Howard and the Houston Texans, especially if he goes out there and plays good football for this franchise. So lock him up if you can, but again, I still think it depends on how DeMeco Ryans and Nick Caserio view him as a player compared to what that Nick Caserio always like to say, that money. So we'll see. Thank you guys for checking out today's episode of the Locked On Texans podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Locked On Texans. Subscribe, like, and comment wherever you get your podcast, and especially on YouTube as well.
And as always, I'm your host, Cody M. Davis. Please remember to follow me on Twitter at CodyDavis_24. Once again, that's Cody, COTYDAVIS_24. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, peace.